A 15-year-old boy kneels before a statue of the Virgin Mary, his laptop open beside him, coding a website that would revolutionize how the world sees miracles. But what his friends didn't know was that every line of code, every database entry, every late night spent documenting divine interventions was actually a love letter to the woman he called his spiritual mother. This wasn't just teenage devotion. This was a supernatural partnership that would shake the foundations of modern Catholicism and prove that Mary's maternal love can transform even the most tech-savvy generation. What you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about Marian devotion in the digital age. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because Carlo's relationship with Our Lady contains secrets that every Catholic needs to understand. And if this touches your heart, share it with someone who needs to meet their spiritual mother through Carlo's eyes. Carlo Acutis entered the world on May 3, 1991, but heaven had already chosen his spiritual mother. From his earliest memories, Carlo felt an inexplicable pull toward images of the Virgin Mary. While other toddlers reached for toys, Carlo would point excitedly at statues and paintings of Our Lady, babbling words his parents couldn't quite understand but recognized as pure joy. His mother Antonia later recalled finding 3-year-old Carlo standing before a statue of Mary, having what appeared to be a conversation with someone invisible. When she asked who he was talking to, Carlo simply smiled and said, "Mama's friend." But which mother was he referring to? The answer would become clear as Carlo grew older, and his devotion to Mary deepened into something that amazed even seasoned priests. This wasn't the typical childhood attraction to a pretty statue. Carlo seemed to understand, even as a young child, that Mary was actively involved in his life, guiding his decisions, protecting his innocence, and preparing him for a mission that would touch millions of souls. By age 7, Carlo had established a daily routine that would define the rest of his life. Every morning before school, he would kneel before his bedroom shrine to Our Lady and recite the rosary. But this wasn't mechanical prayer repetition. Witnesses described seeing Carlo's face light up during these morning encounters, as if he was actually conversing with a beloved friend. His teacher at school noticed that Carlo would often pause during lessons and touch a small miraculous medal he wore around his neck. When asked about this habit, Carlo explained, "I'm asking my Heavenly Mother to help me understand." His academic performance began to soar, but more importantly, his classmates started noticing something different about the boy who talked to Mary. What was Mary teaching him that transformed everything he touched? Carlo's parents enrolled him in catechism classes at their local parish, expecting typical childhood religious education. Instead, they watched their son become a theological prodigy whose questions stunned adult instructors. Carlo didn't just memorize Marian prayers, he lived them. He didn't just learn about Mary's role in salvation history, he experienced her maternal presence in his daily life. The breakthrough came when Carlo discovered the story of Our Lady of Fatima. Reading about Mary's appearances to the 3 shepherd children, Carlo felt an immediate connection that went beyond intellectual interest. He told his mother, "Mary came to those children because she needed helpers. I think she needs helpers today too." This wasn't casual speculation from a young boy. Carlo had identified his life's calling. Carlo began studying every approved Marian apparition with the intensity of a scholar and the heart of a mystic. Lourdes, La Salette, Guadalupe, Knock. Each appearance revealed another facet of Mary's maternal concern for humanity. But Carlo noticed something that escaped many adult theologians. Mary's messages weren't just historical events. They were ongoing invitations. At Fatima, Mary had asked for devotion to her Immaculate Heart. At Lourdes, she called for penance and prayer. At La Salette, she wept for humanity's sins. Carlo realized that these requests hadn't been fulfilled. They were still urgent, still necessary, still calling for generous hearts to respond. And Mary had chosen him to be one of those hearts. Carlo's devotion to Our Lady took a dramatic turn when he made his first Holy Communion at age 7. After receiving Jesus in the Eucharist, Carlo spent an unusually long time in thanksgiving prayer. When he finally returned to his pew, tears streamed down his face. His mother asked what had happened, and Carlo whispered, "Jesus told me that Mary gave him to us in the Eucharist, and she wants to give him to everyone." This mystical insight would shape everything Carlo did for the rest of his life. Carlo understood that Mary's role didn't end with giving birth to Jesus in Bethlehem. She continues giving birth to Jesus in every soul that receives him in communion. This realization transformed Carlo's approach to both Eucharistic and Marian devotion. They weren't separate practices, they were inseparable aspects of the same divine love story. Every day after Mass, Carlo would visit the statue of Our Lady in his parish church. Observers noticed that these weren't brief courtesy visits. Carlo would remain kneeling before Mary's image for extended periods, sometimes over an hour, his lips moving in silent conversation. When asked what he discussed with Mary during these visits, Carlo replied, "She tells me about her son, and I tell her about the people who need to know him." This exchange was about to bear extraordinary fruit. In 2002, at age 11, Carlo announced to his parents that he wanted to create a website documenting Eucharistic miracles throughout history. This seemed like an ambitious project for any adult, let alone a sixth grader, but Carlo explained that the idea hadn't come from him. It was Mary's suggestion. "She showed me that people don't understand what they receive in communion," Carlo told his parents. "If they knew about the miracles, they would love Jesus more in the Eucharist." His mother, Antonia, was skeptical. How could the Virgin Mary be involved in a computer project? But as she watched Carlo work, she began to understand that this wasn't just research. It was a form of prayer, a digital rosary offered for the conversion of souls. Carlo approached each Eucharistic miracle with the same reverence he showed during his daily rosary. Before researching any miraculous event, he would first pray to Mary, asking for her intercession to help him present the information in a way that would touch hearts and kindle faith. He often told his mother, "Mary knows which miracles people need to see. She helps me choose the right ones." The results were extraordinary. Carlo's website didn't just compile dry historical data. It pulsed with devotion, wonder, and an unmistakable maternal tenderness that drew visitors into deeper relationship with Jesus in the Eucharist. But Mary wasn't finished with her young apostle. As Carlo's website gained international attention, he began receiving emails from people whose lives had been changed by discovering these Eucharistic miracles. A priest in Brazil wrote that several parishioners had returned to regular Mass attendance after viewing Carlo's documentation of the Buenos Aires miracle. A family in Poland reported that their teenage daughter, who had been hostile to religion, broke down crying while reading about the miracle of Lanciano and asked to go to confession. Carlo shared each of these testimonies with Mary during his daily visits to her statue. He considered every conversion, every renewed faith, every deepened devotion to be a direct fruit of Mary's maternal intercession working through his digital apostolate. "Mary is the one changing hearts," Carlo would insist when praised for his work. "I'm just her computer helper." This humility wasn't false modesty. It reflected Carlo's profound understanding of Mary's role as mediatrix of all graces. Every miracle documented on his website, every soul touched by those accounts, every increased devotion to the Eucharist was, in Carlo's view, Mary's gift to the Church. If you're inspired by Carlo's partnership with Our Lady, take a moment to share this video with someone who needs to discover Mary's maternal love. And tell us in the comments, how has the Virgin Mary been active in your own life? Your testimony might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Carlo's relationship with Mary deepened further when he began experiencing what he privately called Mary's lessons. During his extended prayer times before her statue, Carlo would receive insights about living Christian virtue that went far beyond his years or experience. He understood these moments as Mary's direct instruction, preparing him for challenges he couldn't yet foresee. These lessons covered every aspect of Catholic life: how to maintain purity in thought and action, how to find joy in suffering, how to recognize God's will in daily circumstances, how to pray with authentic faith rather than mere routine. Carlo absorbed these teachings with the eagerness of a student learning from the most beloved teacher. But the most important lesson Mary taught Carlo was about time. "Every moment is a gift from God," Carlo would often say, quoting what he claimed Mary had taught him during prayer. This wasn't abstract theology for Carlo, it was lived reality. He began approaching each day with an urgency that seemed unusual for a teenager, as if he understood that his time was limited and every moment needed to be used for God's glory. This sense of urgency intensified Carlo's devotion to Mary. He began praying additional rosaries, visiting Marian shrines whenever possible, and incorporating Marian feasts into his family's celebrations with special enthusiasm. October became his favorite month because of its dedication to the Rosary, and May brought him particular joy as Mary's month. Carlo's friends sometimes teased him about his obvious love for the Virgin Mary, but he never showed embarrassment. Instead, he would explain with infectious enthusiasm how Mary had changed his life, protected his innocence, and helped him understand God's love. Several of his classmates began joining Carlo for daily rosary prayer, drawn by his genuine joy rather than any pressure to participate. What they didn't realize was that they were witnessing the formation of a future saint. In 2005, as Carlo entered high school, his devotion to Mary took on prophetic dimensions. He began speaking more frequently about the urgency of Mary's messages at Fatima, particularly her warnings about the consequences of sin and her promises for those who practiced devotion to her immaculate heart. Carlo organized rosary groups among his classmates, led by his example rather than formal authority. He would gather friends in the school courtyard during lunch breaks, producing rosary beads from his backpack and inviting anyone interested to join in prayer. These sessions attracted students who had never shown interest in religion, drawn by Carlo's obvious peace and joy. But Carlo's most significant Marian practice was his daily consecration to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Each morning, before beginning work on his Eucharistic Miracles website, Carlo would kneel before his bedroom shrine and formally offer his day to Mary, asking her to guide his work, protect his purity, and help him serve her Son more perfectly. This daily consecration wasn't just words for Carlo, it was a complete surrender of his will to Mary's maternal guidance. Every decision, from the miracles he chose to research to the way he interacted with family and friends, was filtered through his desire to please his Heavenly Mother. The fruits of this consecration became increasingly obvious to everyone around him. Carlo's computer programming skills, his academic achievements, his athletic abilities, his social relationships, everything in his life seemed to flourish under Mary's maternal protection. But more importantly, Carlo himself was being transformed into an ever clearer reflection of the virtues Mary had lived during her earthly life: humility, purity, obedience to God's will, and complete trust in divine providence. Teachers at Carlo's school began commenting on his unusual maturity and spiritual depth. Fellow students sought his advice on problems they wouldn't normally discuss with peers. His parents watched in amazement as their teenage son navigated the typical challenges of adolescence with a wisdom and grace that could only be supernatural in origin. Mary was preparing her chosen apostle for his final mission. In early 2006, Carlo began experiencing what he described as special visits from Mary during his prayer time. He never revealed the complete content of these encounters, but their effects were unmistakable. Carlo's sense of urgency about his apostolic work intensified, and he began speaking more frequently about the importance of living each day as if it might be one's last on earth. "Mary is teaching me that we don't know how much time we have," Carlo confided to his mother. "We have to use every day to love God more and help others find Him." This insight would prove prophetic in ways no one could have anticipated. When Carlo was diagnosed with acute leukemia in October 2006, his response revealed the depth of his trust in Mary's maternal care. Instead of fear or anger, Carlo showed remarkable peace. He told his parents, "Mary has been preparing me for this. She wants me to offer my suffering for the church and for young people who have lost their way." During his final weeks, Carlo's devotion to Mary became even more intense. He asked that his hospital room be decorated with images of Our Lady, and he continued praying the Rosary daily despite his increasing weakness. Visitors were amazed by Carlo's serenity and joy, even as his physical condition deteriorated. "I'm not afraid," Carlo told a priest who came to give him last rites. "Mary is with me, she's going to take me to her son. On October 12, 2006, the feast of Our Lady of the Pillar, Carlo Acutis peacefully entered eternal life, his rosary clutched in his hands and a smile on his face. Those present said his final moments seemed more like a joyful reunion than a sorrowful farewell. The timing of Carlo's death on a major Marian feast wasn't coincidental. It was Mary's final gift to her beloved spiritual son. But Carlo's partnership with the Virgin Mary didn't end with his death. Reports began surfacing almost immediately of people experiencing extraordinary graces through Carlo's intercession, often in connection with Marian devotions. Individuals who prayed to Carlo while holding rosary beads reported sudden spiritual insights, renewed faith, and miraculous healings. The miracle that opened Carlo's path to beatification occurred when Matias Viana, a Brazilian boy suffering from a rare pancreatic condition, was instantly healed after his mother prayed to Carlo and touched the child with a relic of the young saint's clothing. What made this healing even more significant was that it occurred during a family rosary, connecting Carlo's intercession directly to Marian devotion. This pattern has continued throughout Carlo's journey to canonization. The graces received through his intercession often involve renewed appreciation for the rosary, deeper love for Mary, and stronger devotion to the Eucharist, the three pillars of Carlo's own spiritual life. Today, Catholics around the world are discovering that praying to Blessed Carlo Acutis opens new pathways to Marian devotion. Young people especially find in Carlo's example a model for living authentic Catholic faith in the modern world, guided by Mary's maternal wisdom and protected by her loving care. Carlo's feast day, celebrated on October 12th, has become an occasion for special devotion to both the Eucharist and the Virgin Mary, reflecting the inseparable connection Carlo discovered between love for Jesus and love for his mother. As we conclude this exploration of Carlo's Marian devotion, the challenge becomes personal. Carlo discovered that Mary isn't just a figure from biblical history, she's an active, loving, concerned mother waiting to guide each of her children toward deeper relationship with her son. Carlo's example shows us what happens when a young person takes Mary's maternal love seriously, responds to her guidance with generosity, and allows her wisdom to shape every aspect of life. The result wasn't a life of restriction or limitation, it was a life of extraordinary freedom, joy, and fruitfulness that continues to inspire people worldwide. Before you leave, subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss our videos about the saints and their devotion to Our Lady. Share this video with someone who needs to discover Mary's maternal love through Carlo's example, and let us know in the comments. How will you deepen your own relationship with the Virgin Mary after hearing Carlo's story? Carlo Acutis proved that Mary's maternal care isn't reserved for mystics or religious professionals. She longs to guide every one of her children with the same tenderness, wisdom, and protection she offered to her teenage apostle. The question isn't whether Mary wants to be involved in our lives. The question is whether we'll respond to her maternal invitation with the same generosity Carlo showed. In an age of confusion, distraction, and spiritual danger, Mary offers the same guidance she provided to Carlo: trust in her son's presence in the Eucharist, faithfulness to daily prayer, purity of heart, and complete abandonment to God's will. These aren't burdensome obligations, they're pathways to the same joy and peace that radiated from Carlo's brief but extraordinary life. This is the legacy of Blessed Carlo Acutis, a digital age saint whose love for Mary transformed him into a living tabernacle of grace, whose partnership with Our Lady continues to draw souls toward the heart of her Son, and whose example proves that Mary's maternal love can sanctify even the most modern expressions of human creativity and apostolic zeal. Through Carlo's intercession and Mary's guidance, may each of us discover the joy of living as beloved children of the Queen of Heaven, walking confidently toward the same eternal home where Carlo now enjoys the vision of Mary's Son forever.